The quiet rebuilding after letting go. The night felt different, not lighter, just honest. There was a quiet in the room that didn't feel empty, but expectant, as if something inside you had finally stopped gripping. You didn't plan for anything to shift. You didn't sit down with intention. You simply reached a point where your spirit whispered, "Enough." And in that whisper, something loosened. Something you've been holding for far too long. It slipped quietly, almost unnoticed, like a shadow stepping out of your chest. At first, you didn't know what to do with the space it left behind. It felt unfamiliar. A silence that wasn't heavy, a stillness that didn't judge, a breath that reached deeper than usual. You sat with it, unsure. You wondered if something was missing, if you should feel more, if you should be doing something to fill the quiet. But the quiet wasn't emptiness, it was clearing. A clearing where the old weight once lived, a clearing where your spirit could finally breathe without bracing. Slowly, something began to rise in that space. Not joy, not relief, something softer. A small sense of self returning. A version of you that had been buried beneath the noise of holding on. You noticed it in subtle ways. The way your shoulders rested without effort. The way your thoughts moved without spiraling. The way your emotions felt less tangled, as if they were finally allowed to settle into their natural shape. It wasn't a transformation, it was a remembering. A quiet return of the person you were before the weight. Inside you, things began to reorganize. Old fears lost their urgency. Old stories lost their grip. Old wounds lost their sharpness. Your mind started sorting through what remained, what still mattered, what never did, what was yours, what belonged to someone else, what you carried out of habit, what you carried out of love, what you carried because you didn't know how to put it down. Piece by piece, your inner world began to make sense again, not through effort, but through honesty. Strength returned quietly, not as force, but as clarity. You felt grounded in a way you hadn't felt in years, not because everything was perfect, but because you were no longer fighting yourself. Your decisions felt cleaner. Your boundaries felt natural. Your emotions felt honest. Your presence felt steady. You weren't rebuilding the old version of you. You were discovering the version that had been waiting beneath the attachment. The version shaped by truth, not fear. By stillness, not survival. Rebuilding happened in small moments. The way you woke up without rushing. The way you breathed before speaking. The way you chose silence instead of reaction. The way you walked away from what drained you. The way you moved toward what nourished you. You rebuilt your inner world with gentleness instead of urgency. You chose conversations that felt real, environments that felt calm, people who met you where you stood, thoughts that didn't bruise your spirit. The rebuilding was quiet but powerful, the kind of rebuilding that lasts. Eventually, clarity became direction, not a plan, not a goal, a direction, a subtle pull toward what felt aligned, a quiet knowing of what no longer fit, a natural movement toward peace. You stopped forcing, stopped gripping, stopped chasing. You began to move with life instead of against it. And in that movement, you discovered a truth you weren't ready to see before. Letting go wasn't the end. It was the doorway. Later, when the night was still, you sat in the quiet again. But this time, the quiet didn't feel strange. It felt like home. a place where your breath was steady, a place where your thoughts were gentle, a place where your heart was no longer carrying what wasn't yours. You realized something simple, something honest, something true. You didn't lose anything. You returned to yourself. And in that return, you found the beginning of a life shaped not by attachment, but by clarity.